Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. House Speaker Danny Perez is moving forward with a plan to cut the state sales tax from 6% to 5.25%. The reduction would save Floridians about $5 billion. Governor Ron DeSantis has come out against the plan, saying he wants to use that $5 billion to send every person with a homestead exemption a check for $1,000. The difference, of course, is that not everyone owns a home, and the governor's plan would do nothing to bring tax relief to folks who rent. Also, the governor's plan is a one-time rebate, where the sales tax plan would be permanent. This week, I spoke to House Speaker Perez about why he is pushing this plan forward.
Well, I don't think anyone can disagree with taxes are not something that we want to increase. We want to decrease taxes, all taxes, property taxes, sales taxes. But there are some that we as a legislature are constitutionally able to change, and others we are not. The sales tax is the one tax that affects the most amount of Floridians, all Floridians, and that the legislature actually controls. And so we decided to cut the budget by almost $5 billion, which, Jim, has never happened in the state of Florida with a tax cut this large. And at the same time, we reduced the sales tax by 0.75% by doing that cut. And that's a sales tax cut that hasn't happened in the history of the United States. And so we tried to make sure that we made a tax cut, of course, and that we were fiscally conservative with our budget, but that we affected the most amount of Floridians. That's how we arrived to the sales tax.
The governor is advocating that instead of a sales tax decrease, he wants to send every person who has a homestead exemption a $1,000 rebate check, which is roughly about the same amount of money, $5 billion. Why do you believe that's not the right approach? Why do you think he's wrong in that approach?
So I believe that the $1,000 that the governor wants to give each person that has a homestead property, I don't even think that gets to the full $5 billion tax cut. I don't think he's proposing as large of a tax cut as we are. Quite frankly, remember, he released his budget before we did. His released budget is higher than ours. His released budget never accounted for any of those two, neither the property tax initiative or the sales tax that we have proposed. And the reason I say the property tax initiative is under his proposal of giving $1,000 to every homestead property owner, you would not be decreasing the budget. You would be increasing the budget. And so I think there are two different things. That being said, Jim, I have told the governor, and I've said this publicly, I'm all for cutting property taxes. I haven't gotten a proposal on truly cutting property taxes at the legislative level from the governor. And maybe that's because that really comes from local government. They are the ones that control property taxes. And as you've discussed before publicly, this is something that has to go to the ballot, and the voters have to decide on whether or not they want to cut property taxes in exchange for whatever services property taxes today fund. And that includes obviously police and fire and some K through 12 education stuff. But look, at the end of the day, we can all agree that we want all taxes to be cut. The one that we control are sales tax, and anyone that is against a tax cut of $5 billion and in an instance like this one where the money goes directly back to the people, I would have to disagree with whoever thinks that cutting $5 billion from the budget is a bad idea.
Well, he's arguing that the sales tax reduction really doesn't benefit Floridians as much as it'll benefit Canadians and Brazilians. His quote was, "I want Canadian tourists and Brazilian tourists subsidizing the state and making it so Florida residents pay less taxes. I don't want to give Canadians a tax cut." His argument is that the sales tax is more often paid by folks who aren't residents of Florida. What's your response?
I think the number is about 15% of our sales tax gets paid for by tourists. But a majority of that is paid for by Floridians. But I think his comment is disingenuous because he's supported tax holidays for gas, for fuel. Tourists buy fuel when they come to the state of Florida. He's had school supplies taxes. I mean, he's had multiple tax holidays where tourists are a part of that solution. And not that I'm against those, by the way, Jim. I'm okay with that. I voted for them. I agree with them. But it's hard to say that he's against the sales tax cut because tourists, 14 or 15% of the population are going to get a tax cut, and he only wants it to go to Floridians when he has signed budgets every single year that he's been here with tax cuts that have also been paid for in some capacity by tourists. By the way, I support that, but it's hard to, I don't agree with him that cutting the sales tax cut by 0.75%, a total of $5 billion, is a bad idea because it's going to help tourists or foreigners or Canadians, however he wants to do it. I mean, look, I don't know why he's reached that conclusion, but he has every right to do so. And I hope eventually he sees that being fiscally conservative and cutting the budget from last year to this year, which by the way hasn't happened during his tenure. I hope that is something he eventually gets on board, and I believe that the governor is a fiscal conservative, and eventually we'll get to that endpoint.
The Senate president issued a memo this week, sort of straddling between both positions. He said, I believe it is prudent that final tax cut package of this size be predominantly non-recurring, referring to your sales tax argument, while permanent tax cuts are explored during the interim. His concern seems to be that the state economists project that while this would cost roughly $5 billion, as you said, and that the state would have currently a $2 billion surplus, within 2 years, because of economic issues, the state could be facing a $7 billion deficit. And so therefore, we shouldn't do something in the long term when we don't know what the economic prospects for the state is. What's your response to that?
First and foremost, President Albritton is a good man. He's a great partner across the rotunda, and he's doing a great job leading the Senate. I don't agree with the financial outlook that he thinks the state will be in. I actually see it quite the opposite. I think by cutting the budget in a recurring manner, which is a permanent manner, it puts the state of Florida in a better position over the next 3 years. God forbid a recession were to happen. We actually believe that we'll be at a budget neutral position over the next 3 years, as opposed to a deficit because of the tax cut. This is a permanent tax cut. The problem with doing a non-recurring tax cut is next year you're back at a budget of over $120 billion of spending, $125 billion of spending, and then you're in a place to where, God forbid, there is a recession, you have to make meaningful cuts. In the position we're in now, we are not making meaningful cuts. K through 12, our education system was not cut. We increased our budget. This will be the largest K through 12 budget in the history of the state of Florida, while also making tax cuts of $5 billion and giving that money back to the people. We didn't cut any healthcare services. We didn't decrease any rates for Medicaid. I mean, we are funding what is necessary, while at the same time cutting what is fat. We continue to point to local government and say they are doing a poor job. They are spenders. But are we doing that to ourselves? Are we looking internally as a state government saying, where are we misspending? Where do we have fat? Where can we cut and give it back to the people? I don't think we had done that thus far, but we're doing it now, and we're taking from our own budget.
You know, so part of the tension that it seems like between the two proposals is, who do you want to have benefit from a tax reduction? The governor's focus on people with homesteads exemptions, therefore focuses on people who own homes. A sales tax exemption focuses on all Floridians, not just those who own homes, but those who aren't economically able to own homes. You know, Democrats have long held that a sales tax is regressive. To what extent does that play into your thinking of wanting to help a larger swath of people through this tax proposal that you're proposing?
Yeah, but Jim, I want to help the property owners too. We don't have a proposal that directly gives us the opportunity as a legislature to cut property taxes. That we don't have that power. I want it. Of course I want it. I want both, and both are viable. Even the governor's proposal of increasing the budget by just writing $1,000 checks to homeowners, that's a conversation that I'm willing to have. I don't consider that a tax cut, but nonetheless, I'm willing to have that conversation while waiting for a proposal from him that actually is a property tax cut in a manner that we constitutionally are able to provide. I don't know of one, but I'm open to the conversation. I want property owners to eventually not have to pay property taxes. I want every Floridian to eventually not have to pay sales taxes. Are we there right now? No, but how cool would it be if in 15, 20 years, we're in a state that doesn't have a sales tax? That would be the first of its kind, of course. But this is just the beginning of that, and we're trying to chip away at all taxes. And by the way, Jim, the cutting of the sales tax by by 0.75%. Also cuts the business rent tax and a variety of other taxes across the board. So we are also helping small businesses. I mean, this is a one-of-a-kind tax cut that I hope Floridians all over the state in all 67 counties are proud of.
There seems to be some tension continuing to grow between you and the governor, and that he has sort of ratcheted up in recent comments that he's made to the Republican Party of Florida and others. And some of it goes to the issue of Hope Florida, which is the agency or the group that formed by Casey DeSantis. It's a private group that sort of tries to help, that is trying to get codified within state law. There was a story that talked about how they have not met any of their reporting requirements, not filed income taxes, not really provided any transparency to how they do what they do and what happens to the money that they end up receiving. The governor has said that story was planted by Republican and House leaders.
Yeah, I think he told the reporter that that I had alleged to the reporter that I had given the reporter some question as a plant to ask the governor. I mean, that's just a lie. I don't know where the governor got that from. It's unfortunate that he thinks that. That's not something that I have ever done, nor did I do 2 days ago when he made that comment. But hey, it is what it is. It seems that maybe he was having a bad day. I don't know. But no, I didn't do that. When it comes to Hope Florida, we have a bill that's moving through the House, and in the staff analysis, we did ask, as a nonprofit, there are certain questions we have to ask of the nonprofit when you file a bill that affects a nonprofit in the legislature. We did not get that information, and so we put in the staff analysis that we asked for information that we did not receive. But nonetheless, that is a bill that is moving through the process. It has passed a committee stop here. It moved favorably, and I have heard the testimony of many people that have been helped by Hope Florida, but we'll see where the bill ends up. There's still a long way to go before it passes the floor. I know the First Lady cares about it, but we'll take it on a stop-by-stop basis as it goes through the committee process.
I saw you had made some comments about a bill related to child labor that you didn't seem to be particularly supportive of. I'm not even sure where the bill is now moving in the Senate. I'm not sure it's gotten through its second committee, so I'm not sure if it's even moving on the Senate side. But give me your thoughts as to where that bill stands, because I saw that it was still moving through the House. And do you think this is really the approach the state should be taking to weaken rules regarding protecting minors as to how they're treated and being able to work overnights and no breaks and things like that?
Yeah, I've been public on this issue. I mean, we have a great representative in Representative Monique Miller that's moving this through the process. She's working very hard. The bill has changed multiple times as well, Jim. So it's, kudos to her for listening to people and changing it through the committee process. I've been very vocal. I don't think any child should be working late nights or early mornings and then having to go to school the next day. The main priority for a child is to get an education and a good education at that. Some seventh grader who's working till 1 o'clock in the morning and then has an algebra test the next day should never be put in that position. So I've been pretty vocal about some of the hours that our children are working.
Is this the natural outcome of the state's immigration policies and the federal government's immigration policies, that if you have a crackdown on undocumented workers in the state of Florida, that you then have to turn to child labor? Is it wrong or right to make that connection?
I don't make that connection at all. I was waiting for you to finish the question respectfully, but I don't. I look at it as child labor laws. I look at it as, it's interesting. I have 3 children. I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And I remember a parent once told me, I asked them for advice, and a parent once told me, the one advice I can give you is try and allow your children to be children for as long as possible, because they'll never get that time back. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. I want a child to be a child, and a child should not be working late nights or early mornings. If there's a summer job that you want to get at Publix because you want some sort of responsibility for your child, great. I think that's awesome. But I look at this issue completely separate from anything that has to do with immigration.
When we come back, the Florida legislature is expected to pass a bill that will dramatically help people with mental illnesses who are caught up in the criminal justice system. Stay with us. Welcome back. We've been giving you updates on Senate Bill 168, the Tristin Murphy Act. As you may remember from our documentary Warehouse, The Life and Death of Tristan Murphy, the state has long failed to properly treat people with mental illnesses who end up in the criminal justice system. Tristan, a schizophrenic sentenced to prison on a littering charge, killed himself with a chainsaw. This legislation, named in his honor, will be the single greatest reform to the mental health system in decades. It has been a priority of Senate President Ben Albritton and was sponsored by Senator Jen Bradley. It has passed through every committee in the House and the Senate unanimously, with its last committee stop in the Senate Appropriations Committee on Wednesday.
This is a step in the right direction, and changing how we think about mental health is absolutely key.
We need to give people treatment as opposed to incarceration when it's warranted.
Sir Bradley, you've worked hard on this bill, and I commend you for bringing forward something that will save lives and make a lot of people's lives better.
There are families across the state of Florida who live in fear that their loved ones with mental illness are going to have that intersection, are going to cross with the criminal justice system, and they're going to get brought into the deep end of the system, which is really the last place they should be. And so this bill provides some off-ramps on the front end to get people treatment, sustained treatment, where they're not just released without any mental health plan, only to find themselves right back where they started, which is what happened to Tristan over and over again until a felony littering charge put him in the Department of Corrections. That was not a fit under any model, and it had tragic consequences. And this will change that. This will provide some off-ramps and target treatment, and hopefully give families some hope who are trying to manage loved ones with mental illness, that if that intersection does happen, there is hope and there is treatment and there is an opportunity to right the course.
After it passed out of the committee, I spoke to Miami-Dade Judge Steve Leifman, who has pushed for this type of reform for years.
The Tristin Murphy Act is the most significant mental health legislation since the passage of the Baker Act. And the reason that is because when community mental health was developed in the United States, the most acutely ill individuals were still in hospitals. And when we deinstitutionalized, went to the war on crime, the war on drugs, sentencing guidelines, this population with very acute mental illnesses, primarily psychotic disorders, got thrown into communities that were not built for them. And unfortunately, they ended up in our criminal justice system. Miami-Dade County is a perfect example. Between 70 and 80% of our entire jail population suffers with mental illnesses. We spend $1.2 million a day, it's $413 million a year to warehouse this population. And they just continuously cycle between the jail, hospitals, and homelessness again and again at huge cost to the society and at huge cost to themselves. What this legislation does is it basically scales what we developed 25 years ago in Miami-Dade, which is we figured out a way to divert and deflect this population into treatment. And it works. And it will save the state enormous resources. It'll save the county resources, and it will allow this population to live with a life of hope and recovery, and it will improve our public safety. It is a win-win-win. They even attached resources to help communities implement this legislation, but it stops us from a lot of the silly stuff that we've been doing, which is this over-reliance on using competency restoration to try to get people treated, which will never work because competency restoration has nothing to do with treatment. And this is a really smart piece of legislation, and I have to compliment you, Jim, quite candidly. This never would have happened without the brilliant documentary that you did, and you brought this case to life. And, you know, he didn't die in vain as a result of it. And it is a major piece of legislation. Sheriff Perez, the president, they just deserve great credit for taking this and turning it into legislation. And look, I've been working in this area for a long time with the Florida legislature. It's also the first bill that they didn't screw up. I mean, it is clean. It actually does what it says it's going to do. There's not any silliness in it. They didn't play with it. They wrote it in a way that it will actually work. So I'm thrilled with it. We tried to get something like this done 20 years ago. It didn't happen, and it took you and what you were able to do, and also Tristan's mom for advocating positive change and taking a tragedy and turning it into something that is going to make a difference.
At the end of the day, I think what this case did was it brought it in stark reality, what exactly this is. And you're absolutely right about Cindy Murphy, the willingness of Tristan's mom, his dad, to speak out, to let this story be told, really does bring it to life in a way that I don't think anything that you could have testified to or any of us could have talked about could have done in the past.
100%. And look, there's so much noise out there, more so today than ever. And this is, I guess, what it takes, tragically, to break through it. But, I think as President Biden used to say, you want to bring purpose to tragedy, and that's what happened here. And it really is going to make a difference in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives. This stuff works. Our program reduced arrests in Dade County from 118,000 to 55,000. Our jail audit went from 7,400 to 4,400. That's the kind of results that you get by passing this type of legislation. And so, like I said, it improves our public safety, it spends tax dollars a lot more effectively, and it allows people with these very serious illnesses an opportunity for hope and recovery. And I think it's going to make a huge difference throughout the entire state. And I will tell you this, I think it will be emulated nationally. I know of no other state that has passed legislation this clean, that attacks the problem at the root and spends the resources where they need to be spent so that we keep people out of the criminal justice system and we make the criminal justice system the last resort for people with these serious mental illnesses, not the entry point.
One of the things that I saw that I found rather heartening was you have the program that you pioneered here in Miami-Dade County. This legislation calls for expanding it in Hillsborough County. And during some of the Senate and House committee hearings that I've been watching on it, you had members from other counties sort of coming forward and saying, I look forward to bringing this into my county. I'm looking for, Senator Harrell talked about wanting to do this in Martin County. Other senators talked about wanting to bring it into their counties, to talk to their county sheriffs about expanding this. It almost now becomes the type of thing where it becomes a status thing. Can you bring this? Can you deliver this to your county? Why should it just be Dade or Hillsborough? Let's bring it elsewhere.
And I think what will happen is, advocates around the state will see it and they will push their own local communities to make this happen. But this is the thing. All you need to do is speak to your local sheriff, who is the largest mental health provider in the community. And they know it's wrong. They know it doesn't work. They also know it is enormously expensive. Because remember, when this population is behind bars, they do not qualify for any Medicaid or insurance. So the county spends or has to pay 100% of the cost. And this population also has very, very serious primary health costs, which the county also has to pay for. But when you divert them into treatment outside the jail, they then become eligible for Medicaid dollars, and it significantly reduces the local cost, and you get much better outcomes. So like I said, it's a win-win all around. It's beautifully written, and very confident it's going to make a huge difference in the state and eventually around the country.
The Tristin Murphy Act will be on the Senate floor next week. We'll keep you posted. We'll be right back. Well, that's all the time we have. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.